Hey folks, welcome to another live stream. Thank you very much for joining. So there's been so much stuff around homeschooling, the future of education, online learning, all of those things. And I'm trying to do the same with my kids. I mean, my kid doesn't want to listen to me when I'm trying to teach her. So it's an absolute nightmare. So I thought it'd be really important to chat about it. In the UK, schools are shut. A lot of other countries as well. So I thought I'd get my friend McKenzie Cerri, who is co-founder of Graydin. She teaches teachers through coaching, which she can tell us all about. And she is expert at all of this stuff. So McKenzie, welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Nice to see you too. Teaching. It's been, I feel like personally myself, I'm like teacher, parent, business owner, husband, father, dad, like things like that. So it's been crazy. So it'll be really interesting to hear your thoughts and advice on what I can do to help my kid actually learn. But before we do that, and we spoke about it off air, technology and like the digitalization of education now, and we spoke about it. A lot of kids are fortunate enough to have loads of tech, laptops, iPads and stuff, great internet connections, but a lot aren't. So yeah, just wanted to chat through that. It'd be useful for, really as time goes on to make sure that it's really equitable, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the democratization of education is a real challenge. And before we go there, I just first want to acknowledge you, like very many people, are wearing a lot of different hats right now. And I think about it like hats, because when we then later talk about education, educators wear a lot of different hats. And in many cases, you're an educator and a company owner, and so there's a lot of different skills and tools that are needed in order to play those roles. What's up?
That's true. That is very true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And so then when we speak about access, it's a huge challenge. It's an incredibly huge challenge. And there are a lot of things that are happening right now that are helping to change that, right? Like, I think that there's a question around what is the future of education? And it definitely is happening in this very moment.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely. It's been interesting. I'm interested to hear your perspective, but from my perspective, if I think about the school that my kids go to, which is primary school, or one's even at nursery, so even younger. But the school had to really pivot quickly. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think schools probably moved a little bit slower than businesses probably moved, but they really had to get their online learning and provision like up to speed straight away. And a lot of these teachers and schools just weren't used to it, right? I mean, just weren't ready for that.
Absolutely. Even now. So, and a lot of it is about access. So I think about a gentleman named Graham Laurie at ACS, that he's been going around and delivering laptops to schools.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people doing really great work in order to support, but there isn't that access with especially, I mean, specifically in the UK, but like globally.
Yeah, that's true. Just talk about teachers for a bit, actually. How have given you work and trained teachers? How have you found them adapt? Have they adapted well?
It's been challenging. Let's put it that way. So I think there's a question around what they're adapting to, right? So I think some of the biggest challenges have been adapting to constantly changing situations, constant uncertainty, and whilst all of that is occurring, and educators need and desire to care for and to do the best job that they possibly can, whilst also taking care of their children, whilst also being a key worker, whilst juggling so many different things. I think like all of us, it has been incredibly challenging, but I think for educators, full stop. And I work with educators in the UK, in Canada, and the United States. So I have obviously a particular perspective about their experience based upon what they tell me, but it's been incredibly challenging. And in instances, it's been incredibly rewarding. for some of these teachers because they've been able to be at home with their family, or they've been able to really stretch and grow out of their comfort zone. But one of the things that this has asked educators to do is to put on a number of other hats that they've always been asked to put on, but it's been heightened. It's been exacerbated as a result.
Yeah. So what kind of hats?
So I was actually speaking to an educator before we came on this call, and I was talking to her about the different roles that she plays. The hat of a coach, the hat of a mentor, the hat of someone who is helping a student deal with their anxiety. So in a way, COVID has helped to raise this veil on education. And what it's shown in many instances is that there are some serious challenges that need to be fixed, and that educators need even more support. And if you speak to a lot of educators, the perspective is they do not have the support they need in order to be able to do the job that they want to do, right? Educators got into, and I'm generalizing, but got into education for the love of teaching and learning and supporting students and empowering them and helping them get from A to B. And when we ask educators about, the access that they have to the skills and the tools that they need in order to help students, and when we look through a lens of coaching or well-being, 93% of teachers believe that social and emotional learning is as important as academic learning, but only 22% of teachers believe that they actually have the tools and skills that they need to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's true. Very true. But I guess as you go into education, as you go into to be a teacher, most of the learning is focused on delivering the material, right? Or the techniques to deliver the material in the right way. Whereas certainly now, I mean, a lot of kids can get, my kids get a lot of information from asking Google, like you can get, but you can get a lot of that stuff. But you're right, like almost, I guess it's pastoral care, right? It's like other skills that kids need to learn to set them up for life, whether it's even like something basic like presentation skills, learning about finance, learning about how to behave in a meeting. I mean, things like that have often been missed, I think, from education. It's interesting that most teachers now that you've spoken to feel that that's becoming more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in a way it's always been important. And because of what young people are going through right now and adults, the focus is even more directed on that. I think the fundamental premise of teachers as a conduit of knowledge is really no longer the case. And it hasn't been the case for some time. And there's a real shift from delivering learning to enabling learning. And the same teacher that I was speaking about mentioned in an ideal world, right? If she could have teaching and learning and education look the way that she wanted it to look in her school, and she's in a London secondary school, teachers would be facilitators. They would be using all of the technology out there in order to support students to learn. And her role would be a facilitator and as a coach to help students get the information that they need in order to learn, and then to learn how to make decisions about what they want to learn, about where they want to study, about whether or not they want to go to university or not, and to do everything that they're being asked to do right now, like support students to overcome their own internal barriers and blockages. And have greater clarity about who they are and what they want. Sorry, Lewis.
How far away are we from that? Like that sounds, I think, the ideal, and it feels like it's going that way. But in reality, are we anywhere near that?
My opinion is more so than we've ever been.
Good.
But not there yet.
Not there yet. Because the thing with kids, I think right now, especially if you're, and I think it varies from, across the age ranges, but if I think about my kid who's 6, who's doing online learning at home, lucky enough to have a computer and a good internet connection, it's interesting. She's trying to be, I don't know, she's maybe building up a little bit of like resilience. Like she wants to see her classmates. She's the kind of girl that gets a lot of energy from being around other people. And she's just trying to get through, like she's got to sit in front of a computer, with all of these different little friends on the screen and chat. I mean, it's fascinating because I think she's learning some great skills by doing that. You know, I mean, she would never have learned to have typed right now if this hadn't happened. She's learning how to use a computer and all of that stuff, which is awesome. But it's interesting, the mental side of it, you know, that just dealing with not being able to go to school and just coping with the unexpected. And like she's uncomfortable, right? And it's like good to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
to learn that, I think is really cool. But whether the teachers are able to support her on that, I don't know. Like her teachers are awesome, and it must be very difficult. Again, not every school does live classes, but this teacher's doing live classes to a group of 6-year-old and 7-year-old girls and their parents. Let's be honest, all the parents are like on the side, like looking at what's going on. It's super hard. The guy's done an amazing job. But to your point, where did he learn that? I mean, I think he's just picked that up. So I think you're right. If teachers can get the support to do that more effectively, it would be cool.
Absolutely. And I think about organizations that are kind of coming in to support that, not from the training in skills and coaching and so on, but are helping to try to alleviate the pressure of educators. So I think about a fabulous organization, and I don't have any affiliation with any of the organizations I speak about, Century Tech, run by a woman named Priya Lakhani. And their focus is around AI and around helping to create individualized learning for students in the classroom and alleviating the pressures of marking and the pressures of tracking that teachers have to do manually in many cases in order for teachers to be able to access those skills within themselves or go out and access the skills that they want to learn to do that. So I think it's like a two-pronged approach. Not only do we need to be able to support educators with these skills, right, or draw out from them the skills that they already have, we need to be implementing things that alleviate some of the day-to-day work that teachers do so that we can support them to kind of be their best versions of themselves in the classroom, whether or not it's online or in person.
Yeah, that's true. There's also a variation depending on what type of school your kids in, right? Private versus comprehensive, or whatever you call it now. But a good friend of mine's a headmaster of a local comprehensive school that goes primary all the way to secondary. And they don't do any online learning and stuff like that. But he said a lot of the kids during the pandemic, I mean, most of them didn't turn up. Now, I don't know, maybe the parents were working, they weren't getting them on the classes, but he's had a real issue, like just checking in to see how the kids are. Because if they're not coming in onto the classes or submitting work, you get worried about them, right? It's like what's happened to them the past year. And so his role, to your point, is super right. It's gone to the pastoral care side. It's like, are you okay? What's your home environment like? You know, how can we get your kid involved?
Absolutely. It's scary. Just to be really frank, it's actually very scary. It's very scary about the fact that many students rely on going to school to be fed.
Yeah.
Right? Many students rely on going to school to be in a safe environment or in an environment where they can be themselves. And of course, that's not the case across the board, but it's the case more than I think we like to think about.
Yes.
And schools are really safe places for students to be. And so absolutely, it's a real challenge when we've moved online to remote learning, when we're in lockdown, and when students don't have access to be able to check in.
Yeah.
Or even when they do, they're off camera and on mute, and there's this real disconnect. And I think one of the things we're really working hard to do is to help educators put more heart and more connection back into, or put heart and connection into this virtual world, because it can be really challenging to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And this is also, the argument, a lot of people argue for schools to reopen, right? I mean, there's this debate, safety, COVID, etc., versus like the mental health and well-being of students. I mean, hey, if you're like, I mean, if you're doing GCSEs and A-levels right now, and you're at that age and you're at home, it must be, it's crazy. I told you this story last time we spoke. I mean, so a friend of mine's got a couple of kids, and one of them is called Johnny. And so last lockdown, my friend was working upstairs, and Johnny, who is about 7 or 8, was watching TV downstairs. Don't judge him. We can speak about TV soon. And so my friend, you watch TV, I love it. My friend came down, and Johnny was gone. And he had his bag, his sports bag was by the door, which he'd kept there because he loves sport, and the bag was gone. So his wife was out with the other kid, and he's like, oh no, I've got to tell my wife I've lost our kid during the pandemic. So anyway, called the police, and they looked for about 4 or 5 hours. And in the end, they found Johnny sitting on his bag outside the local sports centre. Took him home, social services came and all of these things. And they said, Lena, why did you run away? And he said, I've been locked up for 5 months or however long it was at that time. So it really sunk home. It's like, wow, like it really, really is affecting kids. And that boy was just wanted to go out and play football with his mates.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
So it's useful not to forget the impact it can have.
It has a huge impact. Yeah. I mean, we don't yet know the ultimate impact that it's going to have. We really don't, because a lot of times symptoms, show up late in the game. And one of the things we think is really important because of the work that we do and because of what we've seen is to be able to give young people these skills and these tools really early on. So I think about a school that we work with in central London. And one of our educators was saying that their students, when they were back in school, their students sat some mock exams and they had done the worst. I mean, it was unfathomable how bad they did on their mock exams. And the only thing that she could point to was the fact that the fact of COVID, and that they were stressed and that they were anxious. And as a result, they were unable to focus. And she had said to us, I wish that I had taught these students coaching skills. I wish that our school had taught them how to ask themselves really effective questions, how to manage their anxiety, how to turn down that gremlin, that negative self-talk, how to turn up that inner champion, right? How to set goals and get clear about what's really important prior to this. Because I know that if I had been able to share those skills and tools with these young people, right? And they're at a particular age, but you can actually share coaching skills with almost any age. They would be able to manage themselves more effectively. And she believes as a result, their mock exams would have been much better. Yeah,
it's so true. It's funny you mentioned that. I was just getting the book up. Do you know Chris Hoy, the British cyclist? He's written a really cool kids book, which my friend Sophie's been reading to her kids. And I've been starting to read a chapter in the morning to my kids, and it's all about like dreaming big, like imagining success, all of those little things. And I've been trying to get that and instill that into my kids. I mean, they've been, to be honest with you, not interested in listening to me speak, but I'm reading it anyway. But yeah, I think it often goes one of two ways. I mean, going through adversity, which these kids are, can really build, on the positive side. I like to put positive spins on things. It can really build, your character, your resilience. I guess you learn from an early age that life is not a Disney movie and it's not always perfect. And you've got to just kind of, go with the flow. Very easy to say. I know, people really struggle with that, even in adults. I mean, the mental game is just super hard, but that's what I've been trying to do. I think it's a good thing to teach your kids.
Mm-hmm. The mental game is really hard. Yesterday afternoon, my business partner Quinn and I hosted a gathering on Clubhouse. Have you heard of Clubhouse before?
I'm in. We need to follow each other.
Right. Okay. That's awesome. And one of the things that we were talking about was how to take back control. Right? How to take back control during this period of time, and that in many cases it is a mental game. It is a game around what you tell yourself, your internal dialogue, what you hear. And in our courses that we deliver, we talk about this idea that as you drive down your road of life, right, en route from A to B, you have 2 radio stations. And in Graydin, what we like to do is we like to really simplify things. We like to make them simple, but not simplistic. And we want them to be understood by a 7-year-old and a 77-year-old, right? So as you drive down the road of life en route from A to B, you have 2 radio stations. One is your champion radio station, and it tells you that you can do anything. It reminds you of who you are. It cheers you on. It reminds you what your goals and your dreams are, right? It's like your best friend who tells you how awesome you are. And then you have your gremlin radio station. And your gremlin radio station is that inner critic that tells you that you're not good enough or you can't do something. And our ability to choose and have control over these 2 radio stations makes a huge impact in how we deal with everything that's going on around us. And even before that, our ability to notice and have the awareness around these 2 radio stations is incredibly powerful. So that was a discussion we were having. Come and join us next week.
Love it. I didn't know you were on Clubhouse. So for those that don't know, so it's basically, correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like a podcast audio social network where you can join your room and I can hear you talking about these kind of things.
Yep,
so you can even participate in the conversation, right?
Yes, you absolutely can. I like to define it as it's an incredibly long hallway that goes on forever. And there's doors on both sides. And you have the capacity and the ability to open up any door and walk in. And in that room, you have anywhere between 5 and 1,000 people talking about a particular subject. If you raise your hand, you're allowed to be brought up on stage and be part of the conversation. And we are currently running events every day during the week at 5 o'clock UK time. And we're really testing it out right now, but we think it's an incredible platform to have conversations with people all around the world. And education is really prevalent on Clubhouse. And I was in a room a couple of days ago where teachers were talking about best practice.
Right.
And things they were all sharing was that underneath all of their best practice is an absolute desire for young people to feel empowered, connected, and supported in education. Yeah.
Love that. I need to use it more. I've only just gone on there. I haven't even started experimenting yet, but it feels like I should do some, I'm going to do some stuff around recruitment, advice to find jobs, things like that, which I think would be useful. I'm going to explore it. It's just something else that you need to dedicate time to.
Yeah. And it's probably the one thing in the past year and a half that has shown up that I have wanted to dedicate time to.
Really? Wow.
Right? That's an app.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Can you get your recordings afterwards and share them? Or is it just, you've got to be live in the moment?
Yeah, there are some that you can record, but that's usually for competitions. There's like singing competitions and comedy competitions. Otherwise, there is a rule around not recording anything.
Right. Okay. Okay. It's so crazy, right? This is the world that our kids are like wandering into, or creating, actually, even. It's amazing. And back to the teachers who are older, our age, who we didn't quite grow up with this stuff. I sound really old now, but you really have to just appreciate how quickly things move on, and just preparing your kids and young people for whatever might come in the future. I mean, who knows, right? So I found that fascinating. Right, I need to. So on the advice side, being a guy that is trying to homeschool his kid, but not doing a great job. I mean, my kid does not want to listen to me whatsoever. I mean, she doesn't want to listen to me anyway. But you know what it's like. I mean, you don't want to listen to your parent. Like, what can I do to create the environment where I'm not shouting at her, I'm encouraging her, she's enjoying the learning and things like that?
Okay. Yeah, let's dive in. This is great. I think this is a really important question. I think that probably every parent would benefit from this.
Yeah.
So in our coaching, one of the first things that we do in a workshop, in a coaching session, and at home, in a home environment, is something called a partnership agreement. Now, one of the things that we notice gets a lot of pushback from young people and adults are rules, right? The black and white of things.
Yes.
And in coaching, Coaching is this incredibly transformative toolkit that helps to unlock another person's natural abilities. It helps to empower them. It helps them to gain greater awareness and clarity about who they are and what's important to them.
Yeah.
In coaching, we look at the coach and the coachee as being in partnership. And so we do something called a partnership agreement. So there's this assumption that we all know how each other wants to be treated, and we all know how to get the best out of the other person. And that is by no means always the case.
True.
And also, how to get the best out of us might constantly be changing and evolving. So in a classroom environment, teachers do something called a partnership agreement, and you can do it at home and it's just as effective. So you get out a piece of paper. I don't have one in front of me, but you draw a circle. That's the container for the conversation. And this is used in coaching. Kind of most coaches use something like this. And the conversation is around, how do we want to be with each other as a family, right? How can I support you to do your homework? Not, I know how I can support you to do your homework. I'm going to tell you to do it. And if you don't do it, I'm going to get frustrated with you, right? How can I empower you and support you to do it? Or what do you need from me in order to have fun throughout the day? Or how do you want me to be with you when I get frustrated about something? Because instead of us making the assumption that we know what's best in relationship to the other person, we ask them. And so what it does is it helps to raise awareness, but it also helps to empower the other person to articulate like how they want us to be with them.
Yeah.
So I think about like just with my partner, David, for example, right? A partnership agreement around how we want to treat each other during lockdown has been incredibly valuable because we've been able to go back and reference it.
Yeah.
So when you think about your family, right? What are some of the things that you feel like you need from them or how you want them to be with you in order for you to be the best dad?
Yeah. Interesting. And do you know what? Over the lockdown, what really changes is the amount of time you spend with someone.
Absolutely.
Right? Because pre-lockdown, so it sounds like pre-World War and post-World War. Pre-lockdown, I was never working at home. So the girls weren't used to me being at home. They weren't when I'm working. So when the pandemic happened, I'm like in the room I was working in, and they were like just running in. They didn't really realize, right? So it took a bit of time for them to get used to the fact that I was working. And after both of them video bombed my video call in bikinis, wearing their goggles and their little hats, I'm like, you don't want to be that guy like shouting and pushing your kids out of the video. So we kind of just sat down and just said, look, I guess kind of when this door's closed, I'm doing my video calls. I'll come have lunch, breakfast, lunch. We then. So I think space is probably like the answer to your question. And then also for me, I mean, we all like a routine, don't we? The cool thing and the challenging thing I found when the lockdown happened was it's cool to be in a routine, but it's also cool to break your routine and create a new routine. I found it quite liberating and refreshing. So then we started to create a different routine. Like we even do a little so with the daughter that's at home, the other one's at nursery, we do like a fake commute to school. So she gets dressed, and whichever, me or my wife, whoever's looking after her that day, we go out the house similar time to we would do normally, and we go for like 10-20 minute like walk or scoot round, come back, and then she's ready to rock and roll. So I think for me, like this like having your space and time, it's a big thing for me.
Absolutely. And so then in a partnership agreement, the conversation would be what I need, right? What I want to like write into the circle is I need space. And so now as a family, let's have a discussion about what that looks like for each of us, right? And maybe a child says, well, I don't want to give you that space. When you're working, I want to come in and say hi to you. And it's like, okay, if that's the case, then what do we need to agree upon in order for you to come in like every once in a while? Maybe you agree that I'll put a little note on my door when you are allowed to come in when I'm not in a meeting, or something like that. And it's just about having that dialogue where everyone has to say about how they want to be in this experience and during the time.
Love that. Love that. I'm also, a key thing for me is my exercise, because I think, physical fitness and mental health, almost one and the same for me, So we program in like exercise time, and we've really got the kids involved. I mean, the Joe Wicks has been super popular, obviously, but we've been trying to do like movement breaks, exercise for us and for them, which I found actually has really helped as well. So
absolutely, getting out and about like increases. Yeah, it's incredibly vital. I was thinking about a friend of mine. When you were speaking about your kids going off to school in the morning, I was speaking about a friend of mine who went to Paris last weekend.
Right, that's a big commute. That's a big fake commute.
Exactly. And it was incredible. And her whole family, they got all dressed up, they packed all their bags, they went down the road. I think they might have like gone to the train station or the tube, walked there, and then turned around and came back home and took pictures on their trip. And they went out to dinner and they got into character. And it was a beautiful experience for their family. It was a fabulous state break for them. And it really empowered like creativity. And for them, it was a holiday. And I think back, I imagine that, years from now, they're going to look back on that and say, that was probably one of the best holidays we've been on.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, you've got to be really creative and innovative with stuff, because a holiday is just ultimately just a little break from the norm, just changing up a little bit, just to kind of a little rejuvenate, gives you like a little boost of energy, just to then, because I think in the UK, I mean, the schools might be shut until end of March, April, maybe, so there's a lot of time where, and I love this circle. I'm going to do this when I get home. Once that's done, are there any other interesting things to create the right environment for them to learn effectively?
So many. Okay, so starting off with a partnership agreement, right? And that question of how do we need to be with each other? No one's in charge of that. Everyone has to agree.
Right.
And you can change it and adapt it as you go along. And it's brilliant to hold up and say, actually, I don't have one. I thought I might have one on my table. Like, how are we doing with our partnership agreement? How are we with giving each other space? How are we doing with being respectful with each other? How are we doing with listening with each other? And it's fabulous because your kids can hold you to account and you can hold them to account. It's mutual.
Yeah, love that. Do you know what? To hold me to account, I might post mine next week.
Okay,
I'll do it and I'll post it. Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay. I will hold you to account. You will hold yourself. That's great. So that's a starting point.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that we often focus on is how we communicate and how we listen to each other, especially during this time, because communication is so key, because we are around each other all day long.
Yeah.
So just to give a sense, if you think about coaching as a form of help, it sits on what we call forms of help spectrum. So let's say at this end, you have non-directive, and at this end, you have directive. And along this spectrum sit things like consultancy and teaching and managing and counseling and mentoring and coaching. Coaching sits over on the most non-directive end of the spectrum.
Right.
And it's distinctly different from other forms of help. And one of the things that it often gets confused with is mentoring. So if I'm a teacher and I get a mentor, I usually choose a mentor because they are a teacher as well. They have certain expertise that I really want, because ultimately I'm curious about their experience and I'd like some of their knowledge and insight. A mentor's role is to ask questions, but also to give advice. And in some cases, a mentor can be a little bit higher up on the quote unquote totem pole in their role than a new teacher.
Yeah.
But if I'm a new teacher and I get a coach, it looks different. A coach's role is to ask questions and not to give advice. A coach's role is to draw out from the other person their own insight. It is an equal relationship and it's one of partnership. And so it is those are often merged together, Like people often play the role of coach mentor. And although that can be useful in some instances, it's really important to note and distinguish the difference between the two. So we're not asking parents to be coaches and to be non-directive, but what we are asking is for parents and educators, for everyone to realize that there's a spectrum and they have choice around it. That actually, in those instances, when you think that the best thing you can do is be this like really directive individual, maybe you could try being incredibly non-directive and notice what the impact is instead.
Yeah. I love that. No, I love that. I try and do that every day, and you end up getting pushed towards the director side a little bit.
Absolutely. It's quicker, right? It's quicker. It's more immediate. And especially when you feel really rushed and overwhelmed, it seems to be a go-to. And one of the things that we encourage people to do is to actually start with non-directive, unless we're talking about, like, this is not a safeguarding thing that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Right? But to start with non-directive, to ask lots of open questions, and then from that point, make a decision. Do I want to tell this person what to do? Do I want to tell my kid what to do? Or do I not?
Yeah. No, I think, absolutely. I mean, it's classic, isn't it? You tell a kid not to do something and they do it. They can't help it. So, I mean, fundamentally, I think that's great advice. And
in practice, it's challenging, right? In practice,
in reality, it's so difficult to do, especially when, you're on top of each other. I don't know, you're a bit stressed out, you want to do some work, you can't. And then annoyingly, you move it, for me anyway, annoyingly, you move a little bit more directive. And you'd rather be the coach, for sure, asking questions, them giving you the answers. So much of a better place to end up.
Yeah. And I almost imagine, if you're doing a partnership agreement with your family and you say, one of the ways that I want to be is a bit more coach-like. I'd like to be a little bit less directive because I notice I get a lot of pushback and nobody listens to me anyways, right? Sure, you can be that frank.
Yeah.
And there's a question around, so when I am being really directive and it's not really helping you because you don't want to listen to me, could you tell me? Like, would you be up for pointing that out to me? And I appreciate different ages will understand what this means and so on. But even if it's a spouse or a partner, could you say whatever it is in order to highlight to me that actually I'm getting back into that thing where I'm telling you what to do. And it would be a lot more effective if I just simply asked you a question. Now, the thing about asking questions is what you want to be asking really effective and open questions. And so one thing to highlight is not to use the question why. Do you know about this?
I'm going to have to ask you why.
Okay, cool. When we talk about effective questions, we talk about starting questions with how or what, because they're open-ended and they're not past referenced. Yeah. And they are less likely to come across as being judgmental. So the challenge with the question why is that it often, not all the times, but often inspires a person to feel judged or to go back in the past and try to find an excuse for why they did something or why they feel a particular way. And for young people, but also for adults, a lot of times what that means is going back and creating a story to appease the person in front of them. Not always a story that is 100% honest for them. It also, what it does is because it directs a person in the past, it doesn't help a person gain greater clarity for themselves about the reason that they did something or about how they're actually feeling. So in coaching, not in teaching, but in coaching, we completely ditch the word why and we rephrase it into what or how.
Love it. That's so hard to do if you're used to using why so much. But I love that. I love that.
Would you like to practice?
I'd love to practice. I'd love to.
What's your favorite why question that you ask?
Why did you do that?
Okay. Yeah. So if we stick with that one, reframe it using a what question.
What was it? What was it that you enjoyed about doing X, Y, Z?
Absolutely. Try another one.
Why did you throw that food on the floor?
Right? Notice that? Great. And then what did you ask instead?
What was it about throwing that food on the floor that you enjoyed so much? That's what I'm like.
Absolutely. What's the reason that you did that, right? What was your thinking around that? What did you ultimately want? There, even if it seems like it's so silly to just change one word, it makes a huge impact. We've seen it time and time again. We've had parents go home and practice just omitting why and come back to us and say that their entire conversation with their child changed as a result of just reframing the question. So that's another powerful tool to use. What and how, not why.
Love that. Love that. I'm going to be using that too. What and how. Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that. Last point before we sign off. There's a lot of debate around TV time for kids and things like that. What's your view on that? Because obviously right now, a lot of the kids are staring at a screen the whole day learning. Then a lot of them just want to chill out and watch TV or read. What's your view on watching TV if you're a kid or playing computer games and stuff like that?
Sure. My view is that what's most important is that we all, whether or not it's kids or adults, we have choice around what we do and we choose consciously. So I watch television, I listen to music, I do all of the things that we're like talking about. I don't play video games, but if I had video games, I would play them for sure. And so in coaching, we talk about this concept called the inner team. And this idea that, again, going back to that analogy, as we drive down the road of life en route from A to B, in our car, we have these different parts of ourselves that we call on throughout the day, right? So I personally, I have a part of myself that just wants to be alone and do nothing and veg out. Right? And a part of myself that is really focused and incredibly driven. And I have a part of myself that's really playful. And these are all very authentic parts of myself. But the challenge that I face personally, and that I think a lot of other humans face, is when I listen to or call upon one of those parts of myself when it's really not appropriate. So when I have a deadline, but I'm being really lazy. Or I'm being really playful when actually I need to be super focused. And I remember introducing this concept to a student who I had been coaching, and he came back to me years later. I ran into him at university, amazingly. And he came back to me years later and he said, that was incredibly powerful for me because I realized I was listening to that super lazy part of myself when I really just needed to revise. And so knowing that I had these different parts that I could listen to, I simply started calling on that part of myself that knew how to get stuff done instead of listening to that lazy part of myself. So I appreciate it's kind of an indirect way of answering your question, but I think it's what's important for me personally and for coaching in general is providing choice to people and helping them understand how their choices impact like what they're going to do throughout the day, how they feel, their relationships with others, and knowing that they can choose different parts of themselves to call upon. So I might have a conversation with a young person, which is like, okay, what do you want to do right now? And they're like, I want to watch television. And you're like, got it. Okay, so how much television do you want to watch? I want to watch like 2 hours. Okay, so what do you want to get out of watching TV? What do you want to learn? What are you really curious about? What's something else you could do that you might also enjoy doing right now? What do you think the impact is of watching 3 hours? Remember yesterday when you watched for 3 hours and then you got into a fight with your sister? How do you think watching television relates to that? Those type of questions to raise a kid's awareness doesn't mean it's going to be like a fix. Doesn't mean they're going to say, oh, no television. I think that's a great idea. I'm going to go outside and play in the backyard. But it helps to raise their awareness about what they're doing and the impact that it has.
I love that because your whole message and vibe is around clearly coaching and treating your children as such. because a lot of parents tend to be quite say dictatorial, but quite directive, to use your analogy. So I love it, using what and how, and speaking to them and engaging with them. I love that. That's a good advice. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
McKenzie, thank you very much for joining me. We've done 45 minutes, which is awesome. And we should do another one at some point as well. But thank you so much, and I will speak to you soon.
All right, great. Thanks very much. Take care of yourself.
See ya. Bye bye.